let's talk one more time with my friend from NFL Films, senior producer whose eye on the eye in the sky never lies. He is Greg Cosell's back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Greg Cosell?
Rich, I'm doing great. You know, you probably know this. Do you know what today is the 50th year anniversary of?
50th year anniversary of, what is the night? So 1971?
71.
What is that, Greg? What is it?
It would be the release of Sticky Fingers, one of the greatest albums of all time.
Ah, look at you, Greg. Look at you going pop culture off the bat.
You know, I figured you would know that, Rich. I know you're a Renaissance man.
I did not. I didn't. I turned to my NFL, my audio executive, Mike Del Tufo. Normally, you keep me apprised of this sort of stuff.
I am. I
You dropped the ball. It's okay.
I did.
I'll blame it on you.
Sorry, Greg.
I was listening to it this morning, watching tape, you know.
Is that how you watch tape? Where do you watch tape? Walk me through that process.
I watch tape in my office at NFL Films. I've got a TV screen, you know. I've got my Cowboy remote, you know, so I sit and watch tape. It's a beautiful thing.
Okay.
I listen to music. You know, it depends on my mood. But today when I saw that, it was a Sticky Fingers mode, you know.
Fantastic. How many players have you watched tape on, Greg?
About 180, 185 maybe.
Okay, so before we get to the quarterbacks, one last evaluation atop that. Is Kyle Pitts the most talented player that's not a quarterback, or even of all of the players that you've seen on film?
I personally believe he's the best prospect in this draft, yes.
Would you go trade up and go get him if you're the Dallas Cowboys at 10? Flat out, right out the door. What do you think, Greg? What do you think?
Yeah, I think with Pitts, it doesn't matter what two letters you put before or after his name. I think he's a receiver and he's a weapon, and I think he changes the way you can play offense and makes it easier for your quarterback.
Why do you
the way it makes it easier is it gives you more formation variation. You can do more things with what we call receiver distribution and location, which means the number of receivers to each side of the formation and who those receivers are, that's the location. And it gives the quarterback more information before the ball is snapped. And that's what every coach is trying to do. They're trying to give the quarterback the answer to the test before the ball is snapped.
Of course you're trying to do that, and you're able to do that. But what on tape did you see that makes you go, this is how good he is, and how it can be translated to the next level?
Well, his movement traits are off the charts. He's such an easy, natural mover. He's fluid. He can change direction. He's got incredibly long arms, which allows him to make contested catches very easily. He can run. He's such an easy runner. He caught a touchdown this year against Kelvin Joseph, a corner from Kentucky, who has first-round traits, where he was the line of scrimmage tight end, and he just ran kind of a routine, not quite an inbreaker, but he caught the ball against Joseph after making a very good move, and he just kind of ran away from him. And we're talking about a corner. So you're dealing with a kid that can win at all three levels. He's tremendous in the red zone, not only with his hands and his ability to go up and get the ball, but also with his ability to change direction. He runs those wide receiver routes, those change of direction routes like pivot routes, whip routes we associate with slot receivers.
Slot receivers, not even guys outside the numbers. Slot receivers, you're saying?
Yes. So, I mean, I've been doing this a long time, Rich, as you know.
Yes.
You know, I finished 41 years in NFL Films this season.
Yes.
So I've seen a lot of players, and I tend sometimes to be jaded, but this kid, to me, is really special.
Greg Cosell here on the Rich Eisen Show. So then there's the wide receiver class. The Bengals are going to have that choice, I believe, between Jamar Chase to give Joe Burrow a weapon with whom he's most familiar, or Penei Sewell, a protector. What, based on the film that you see, would you say is the better option at 5 for the Bengals?
That's a hard call, only because that becomes a philosophy issue. I mean, how you feel about protection, how you feel about your quarterback being able to handle and at times perhaps camouflage a lesser O-line. Many quarterbacks can camouflage O-line weaknesses or lack of strength in an O-line with the way in which they play with timing and rhythm. I ultimately think Burrow is that guy. Jamar Chase, to me, is another guy that has some special qualities. He's a type A personality. He's an alpha dog. He's got great when I say size, not length per se, but the way he's built. His play strength is really high level. Body control, balance. You know, he reminded me of two guys when I watched him. And normally these things just pop into my head, Rich. I don't sit around for 15 minutes after I watch a guy and say, who does he remind me of? It either pops into my head or it doesn't. But he reminded me in the way in which he played of Steve Smith and DeAndre Hopkins.
Those are two pretty damn good receivers, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, he's another guy whose tape, and obviously I watched his 2019 tape. His tape, in my view, was really, really good.
Okay, and then what about the wide receivers from Alabama? How would you rank them? And I guess you have to also include the fact that the NFL usually just looks at somebody who's 166 pounds, as the Heisman Trophy winner DeVonta Smith is, and just say, well, that alone means you can't be in the top part of this draft.
Well, I'd answer that question this way. I would say that what that means is that DeVonta Smith is a discussion in draft rooms. It doesn't mean he can or can't play, but it's a discussion because he's an exception. So you have to discuss it. Now, you may come away from that discussion and say it doesn't matter. His receiving traits are so good, which they are, by the way, that we feel that can compensate the fact that he's 166 pounds. Or you may come away and say, depending on your view, and say, you know what, we're a little concerned about that. We love the player, but we're a little concerned. So I think when all's said and done, you ultimately have to decide how best to deploy him. My sense is that you'd probably deploy him as what we call an off-the-ball receiver, meaning he's a Z, that he doesn't line up right on the line of scrimmage, where if he's pressed, the corner's literally right there next to him. That if he's off the ball, there's a little more room between him and the corner, and that receiver, the Z, he can go in motion. Because to me, what you want to do with DeVonta Smith is you want to get him free access off the ball. He's silky smooth and he's a strider. You want to allow him to stride out in the initial part of his routes. That's where he's so good. He's so good when he can stride out, and then it gets into the rest of his receiving traits. But you don't want him to have to fight off press coverage too often. I'm not saying he can't do it, but I don't think that's what you want to do with him too often.
NFL Films senior producer Greg Cosell here on the Rich Eisen Show, NFL matchup analyst as well, at Greg Cosell on Twitter. I follow him. You should as well. The best defensive player in this draft is? Fill in that blank. What do you got for me?
Oh, the best defensive player, God. Throw out some names to me. I've seen so many guys.
Okay, you got Parsons. You got Patrick Surtain at the corner. Just those are two choices right off the bat. J.C. Horn is another one that the Cowboys are apparently
I would
looking
say
at. Quiddy Pay
Parsons really intrigues me, because the thing about, if you're going to look at linebackers in today's NFL, to draft a linebacker high, in my view, he has to be able to play in your sub-defenses, meaning 5 DBs, 6 DBs, either as a coverage player, space player, or as a pass rusher. Now, many people may not know that Micah Parsons, when he was recruited out of high school, many recruited him as a defensive end. That's what he played in high school. He has pass rush traits. He is a really explosive athlete, and he's close to 250 pounds. There's not a lot of guys close to 250 who have his kind of explosive movement traits. So he's got special movement traits. He's a fascinating player. And then, like I said, you play in your sub-defense, and he can be either a linebacker playing in space, matching up to tight ends, or he can rush the quarterback because he has experience in his background doing that.
Greg Cosell here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's get to the quarterback evaluation, your last one for us before we get to the draft. We've seen all the pro days now. A couple of them have had multiple pro days. The tape on Trey Lance is 2 years old because 2019 was the last year in which he played. We all know about the evaluation about Mac Jones and what he has suddenly become in terms of the apple of the 49ers' eye, supposedly after the trade, and then Justin Fields, and now Lance is on that carousel as perhaps being the one that the 49ers traded up to third overall. There's also Zach Wilson for the Jets. Walk me through your quarterback depth chart. What do you got for me here 6 days before the draft?
I think, and I'll answer it this way, I think we've reached a point in the NFL where everybody ascribes the same traits. They have the same traits sheet for quarterbacks. It's just the relative value you would ascribe to different traits. So in other words, some coaches might believe we're now at the point where you're limited to not being a great starter if you can't make plays off script. Other coaches might say, you know what, that's a good thing to have, but at the end of the day, I teach my system. It's a structured system because all quarterbacks are system quarterbacks. They're taught a system. And if you can't execute my system to the highest level, the rest doesn't matter. So it's ultimately where you fall on that. We know how Kyle Shanahan, and of course who he drafts is unanswerable right now, but we know Kyle Shanahan has tremendous conviction in his system, right, Rich? We all know that about Kyle. So is he looking for someone who he believes will execute it to its highest level, or has he evolved and is he looking for someone who, yes, he can teach them how to execute it to its highest level, but also would love to have that ability to make some off-script plays because seemingly they happen in every game? That ultimately, to me, is the question. And it's unanswerable right now. Mac Jones has a lot of great traits, no question. He will not make off-script plays. And what you're trying to do with those kinds of quarterbacks is they have to be special in the pre-snap phase, as we said, have the answers to the test, and they have to have tremendous functional knowledge of defenses, knowing which particular defenders are critical based on a given play call.
So you've looked at all the tape?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have like 1 through 5, but if you could.
Well, I really don't, but I'll tell you the guy who in rewatching, who I'm starting to like more. And again, I don't know him, and I don't know where he'll go, but Justin Fields has really grown on me. I think he's got a lot of really good traits, and I'm really curious to see where he goes.
How has he grown on you, Greg Cosell?
I really like the way he throws the ball. To quote a coach that I know, he's got a 65-plus yard arm, so he can drive the football. I think he's got a power arm. I think he can throw with touch and pace. I just think that in some ways it's the Justin Herbert conversation from a year ago. Were there some concerns on tape with Herbert? Yes, there were, because that's all we had as of a year ago. Could you say that about Fields? Sure. But I think he's really a high-level traits quarterback. And we just don't know, or I don't know anyway, why those things that were on tape that were not necessarily positive didn't show up this year. Maybe it's just natural development of the player. Maybe it was coaching. Maybe it's any number of reasons. But that's why I'm so anxious to see where Fields goes, because I just think he has high-level traits.
I mean, last we spoke, Greg Cosell, it was just after the trade had happened, and I asked you, who do you think that they traded up to go get? And that's where we first had that conversation that we just revisited about your concept of what do you want? You want somebody who's going to stick to the script, and you're so darn confident in your script and in your scheme that's the perfect guy for you, or are you going to want somebody who can actually give you those unscripted plays? And that's the question that's going to be posed to Kyle Shanahan with the question in the form of who's your third overall pick, right? So
yeah, and it's unanswerable right now, obviously, but right. I think that's part of the question, and that's a discussion. You have to have that discussion before you draft a quarterback.
But now we also know, in between that point and this point, Greg Cosell, that the Jets have decided that one of these kids in this draft is a better option than Sam Darnold moving forward, and we're assuming it's Zach Wilson. If that's the case, do you like that evaluation that the Jets did and going in that direction?
Boy, yes and no. I mean, Darnold was a guy that, look, I thought he had some concerns coming out. And clearly, those concerns continued to show up through his first 3 years in the league. He's now going to be in what's essentially a Kyle Shanahan system where everything is really well defined. It's impossible to know how he would have handled that. We're not going to see him in that specific system. I think there's more that goes into it than just on-field play here, because I think an organization now gets a chance to reset itself, Rich, when you draft a quarterback, where they were in a tough spot with Darnold, because if they kept Darnold, first of all, the fan base probably would not have been happy. And if Darnold went out week one and was 0 for 3 on his first 3 passes, we know how that would go. So if you're just talking from purely a talent level, I think Wilson presents a little bit more than Darnold has. But, Wilson is not a big quarterback. You don't have to be a big quarterback. We've seen that. But Wilson moves around a lot. There's a lot of Patrick Mahomes in Wilson in that there's based on pure college tape, I'm speaking now. We know what Mahomes has become. There's a little bit of an undisciplined, reckless nature to Wilson, and I'm curious to see how that plays out within a highly structured system that he will now be taught, if that's who the Jets pick.
And, usually when a first overall selection gets his fifth-year option picked up, it's not a big bit of news, but this is Baker Mayfield we're talking about now, and that's apparently what the Browns have done. And we had Kevin Stefanski on the show yesterday. It seems like that those guys are appropriately matched at the hip. They're meshing very well. Do you agree with that decision? And also the Carolinas apparently going to wait till after the draft to pick up Darnold's fifth-year option, which means they might actually choose 1-8 or give the indication to somebody, you better come up and trade with us because we might take your guy. That might be an interesting scenario right there. What do you think?
As far as Baker, I agree with that. I think that he improved dramatically. Again, I think this is why there's so many variables, because I think the Kevin Stefanski system, which starts with play action, and I think that play action really helps define reads and throws for a quarterback. I think that really helped Baker. It was evident watching the tape that he became more confident as the year progressed. They started to throw the ball more later in the season. Yes, I think with that system, and that system has really done well for a lot of quarterbacks. It's essentially a similar system. It has elements, of course, of the Gary Kubiak system, and we saw, for instance, what Gary Kubiak did for 3-4 years with Matt Schaub in Houston. It really presents, I hate to use the term that it's quarterback-friendly because it's so cliched, but quarterback-friendly means certain things, that it presents defined reads and throws based on the structure of your offense, the use of personnel, the use of formations, what that means for the predictability of defense. There's so many things that go into it, and I think that it really helped Baker Mayfield, and he clearly was a comfortable quarterback as the year progressed.
Greg, always enjoy our chats. I tweeted out the last time I could talk ball with you all day. I really could, but I have to take a break and make sure that my partners get their commercial time. I appreciate it. Let's talk after the draft, if you don't mind. I always enjoy our chats.
No, I'd love to, Rich.
Right back at you. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
Right, you bet. That's Greg Cosell. I follow him. You should too. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.